And we have with us this afternoon to give us some background information and to testify on the proposed housing-related appropriations from the federal ARPA Act. And so we have Commissioner Hanford with us, as well as, I don't know, it's Gus on the screen oh, there's Gus, as well as Gus Seelig and Jen Holler from VHCB. Obviously, housing is an important area of need, and we thought it would be helpful to us to have some testimony today relative to the governor's housing proposal. How we've already put in some money between $315, and then the House has included additional funding, and then the governor has a very large proposal in the ARPA funding. It's a multi-year proposal. And so we are asking, I think probably the best lead would be for Commissioner Hanford to present to us for fiscal year 22, what is being proposed for housing related expenditures from the ARPA grant. And the other thing that is helpful, if you're aware of other connections, ARPA's got so many different funding streams, like there's something for childcare, there's something for this, something for that. So I know the homeowners, to help people with who own their own homes, homeowners got nothing in the rental assistance back in, the December CRISA Act. But if there are other connections out there, other funding streams that you know about, it would be helpful if you would just make that connection for us, because most of us don't profess to have that detailed knowledge of the entire piece of legislation. And so I just, if there's some that come to mind, I will tell you on the housing front, and it's not in the governor's proposed, and that's part of what our problem here, or our challenge, I guess, is the governor's proposal is how he would spend $1 billion. But there are a number of things that the proposal does not include that the legislature feels would be important to address. And one of them is utility assistance for homeowners. We're getting a lot of communication from utilities in terms of the arrearages, and if the arrearages aren't caught up, it could mean it has a detrimental impact. It could have a 2% rate increase, which really doesn't help businesses any, particularly energy intense businesses, as well as, and maybe there's the homeowners grant is still out there, and how we can align needs that we're seeing today with what we think is going to be available assistance, maybe just out a bit. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to you, Josh, and then I'll have Gus and Jen follow.
Well, thank you. For the record, Josh Hanford, Commissioner of Vermont Department of Housing and Community Development. First, I'll just address your last point. In the ARPA bill, there is $50 million coming to Vermont for homeowner assistance from mortgage and utilities. Utility arrearages for homeowners is allowable expense of that $50 million. The challenge is that Treasury has not released the application to ask for these funds yet. Although there is a 45-day clock for many of these funds to seek our share of the funding, and we've already submitted a letter saying, we're planning to apply, consider this our effort to apply to meet the deadline, since they have not released the actual application process for any of these, I'll call them formula housing grants. So it's $50 million to Vermont for homeowner assistance and utility assistance, another $152 million coming to Vermont for rental assistance, on top of the $200 million in rental assistance that came from the December 27th bill. There is some other smaller allocations as well in there. Maybe Gus or Jen could speak to a little bit that deal with the home program. as well as some specific programs for human services that are directly funded, on a sort of formula basis for specific needs. The governor's housing proposal with ARPA funds is only from the billion plus state fiscal recovery fund. That's the only source of this funding. There's also the local fiscal recovery fund, which is over 300 million coming to Vermont for municipalities directly. And then there's also I think it's about $113 million capital projects fund. Those are all separate pieces. And so this housing proposal is part of the governor's ARPA $1 billion proposal for the state fiscal recovery fund. And do you want me just to keep going, Senator? Or
yes, I think you should. Obviously, I guess I would say the governor's proposed use of ARPA fund assumed all the funding in the formula grants plus that share that he's allocated from ARPA.
Not the formula grants. The formula grants are not included in the billion.
I understand that. I'm saying the governor is carving out that housing part of the billion. Assumes every other housing related stream is added to it. It's additive as opposed to the extent to which it interplays, and may make an adjustment to say, gee, we wouldn't have allocated this much for this particular part of our housing proposal because this federal funding stream is now available to do exactly the same thing. So
exactly.
I think from the administration's perspective, everything is additive.
Exactly. And it might be helpful to know that the team of housers, including Gus and Jen and others, we're right now putting final touches on a matrix of all the funding that has come in over the last year or two that supports housing by various type and eligible activity. We're doing some final vetting of that, and we can show you how these all add up, what the different sources are, what's already in place, what's proposed, and what their target use is, whether it's for capital, homeownership, rental assistance, homelessness assistance. It's quite a lot of funding. So it's pretty easy to lose sight of it, including this allocation that we're talking about today, the 249 million. Last I checked, the total add up was almost $850 million. Of funding to Vermont for housing, including this proposal. So it is a lot to keep track of. This proposal is all about building housing. It's all about the capital. What we've struggled with is so much of the other federal relief has been to support emergency rental assistance, emergency homeowners assistance, nightly shelter. And what we are having trouble is the units. It's hard to transition people from shelters and emergency housing situations to units that aren't available that we've yet to build. We've had a housing shortage for a long time. We're in a housing crisis mode at this point. The pandemic has really underscored the essential nature of shelter for maintaining health, and our housing service providers and our network mobilized, dispersed the federal funds early on to reduce the risk of those experiencing homelessness, to provide this temporary housing and services and lodging establishments and all other arrangements across the state. We put in place early on rental and mortgage assistance from the CRF money to keep people housed. But also this national emergency sort of stressed Vermont's safety and security, and the remote work possibilities have really brought people to Vermont. We've become an attractive place to now call home and work remote, and this has driven up the middle income, the home ownership out of reach for most middle income Vermonters to buy a home now. So this proposal is trying to address all these different housing pinch points that we've seen exacerbated by the pandemic. And, it's really the greatest investment in housing that in our lifetime that we've seen as a proposal. And it's got broad but yet targeted investments in housing, with a broad goal of trying to bring on 5,000 units to market by the end of 2024. It's both focused on building new housing, rehabilitating distressed and underutilized properties, transitioning homeless to sustainable, safe housing that we can afford long term. We know about the 2,000 households that are still in motels and homeless shelters. And we also have this middle income families that have been priced out of homeownership in Vermont. So this money responds directly to the housing crisis exacerbated by the pandemic. And it provides real solutions to the demographic challenges facing Vermont now and in the future. We know housing construction produces instant economic stimulus. It's proven to have some of the highest economic return on investment, and it has lasting measurable benefits. So we think this is the right place to put this money. An additional housing stock will stabilize our housing costs and provide opportunity for Vermonters to build wealth. And, who's going to do this work? Who's ready? This is the communities, the affordable housing organizations, our community partners and developers, home builders. They all are prepared and know we need to build this housing now and also for the future to sort of thrive in Vermont. We have communities that have been growing and have planned for new housing needs for years. Multiple studies and planning efforts have already established where we need new housing to be built. Other parts of the state have been planning for the reinvestment in their existing stock that's been underutilized. We have all of our housing organizations and community partners that have been working more collaboratively than ever and are in a close network that are still ready. They're tired, but they're ready to continue to respond to this need and this crisis and build permanent housing solutions. When we have home builders and contractors that are ready to build this housing we need and this missing middle housing that's going to set us up for a better future and leverage this public investment. And we also have state agencies and regional partners that have been collaborating to remove barriers and are ready to coordinate on this, once in a generation opportunity to build these homes. And so, the plan lays out in years sort of the strategic sort of goals of this effort and really looks at year one, trying to address as many of the acute housing needs as possible, realizing we need to transition folks from these emergency housing situations, hotels and motels quickly. We're going to spend this kind of money just paying for nightly shelter when we could be providing a stable housing into the future. So it provides money for increased emergency shelter capacity actually at the shelters. It provides funding for rapid new permanent housing to be built with projects that are ready to go in all different forms. It also plans to sort of leverage our existing pipeline of affordable housing projects that so many have been working for years. To plan typically takes 2 or 3 years, and then to receive the funding to build them takes another 2 or 3, 4 years. So we can dramatically fund much of that pipeline that's in planning with an effort like this, and bring units that are high quality, mixed income, in the right smart growth locations to construction quickly with our network and working collaboratively, leveraging the other sources, VHCB and VHFA and others out there.
Who's in your network, Josh? It would be very helpful. Obviously, VHCB. I mean, we have the usual housing. We've got our local housing entities. And when you're talking about, we've got people ready to go. Builders, I assume you must be talking to the association that represents that the contractors. So when you're talking about this network or you're talking about this work group, obviously it's got to be more than you, or you've got you've got a lot of work ahead of you. So could you just give us some idea in terms of who is coming together? And what we have is how the governor is proposing to spend the money over that 3-year period of time in the different buckets. Are there different groups of players, and how you're going to roll this out? Because we're hearing things, for example, a lot of the motels want the motel rooms available now because with things opening up, people are going to be traveling again. So you've got short-term kind of needs, and then you've got things that take a little bit longer before they actually come online. I'm really happy you're talking about, you said housing mixed income in the right locations, because I do think one of the things that has been of concern to us is the utilization of motels. Have had some rather unfortunate incidents. I don't need to relate to them. And that gets into when you have a concentration of certain demographics, and it's sort of like, a mini Cabrini Green in some regards. So if you could just tell us who has been involved in this and what you see. We heard something like 600 units would that be in the first year is your goal for the on the getting people out of emergency housing?
So, absolutely. On the motels situation, we just had a meeting with FEMA yesterday. They have concerns with the situation going on in some of the units and the challenges, and they're looking for more permanent solutions as well. And they're dealing with this across the country. We're asking them for models, the successful models that they've seen transition. To be honest, from what we're hearing from them, we're ahead of a lot of other states on planning for this. Some states have simply just stopped paying, and folks have been dispersed, and we want to have a better solution than that. And it is an aggressive timeline to bring units online in the first year. There is 600 targeted. It would be a whole bunch of different opportunities. There may be a few locations where a density like we've seen before, what we've seen in the past to address these sort of conversions might work. A lot of this also should be looked to for some of our affordable housing projects that are nearly ready to go. They're just waiting for another piece of funding to get going, that typically they would have to wait a whole nother year for a new round of 9% tax credits, let's say, where we can fill the gap with this money and they can be under construction. It's hard to exactly plan out every unit, but that 600 was AHS's goal to rehouse that number of families, that number of households to transition out of the motels. They've already done quite a bit over the last year between the work that VHCB did and some of the VHIP units, but more folks are entering the system. And so we need a more permanent long-term solution, which is building these housing units. And so it's a mix of both affordable housing that we typically know that's already planned for, that's ready to go, but for this funding that could fill the gap, and some opportunities that make sense for that rapid conversion like we've seen in the past. And so when I say that network is ready to go, at the very highest level, it's the funders, it's VHCB, it's VHFA, it's DHCD, it's the Vermont State Housing Authority, because they have rental assistance and vouchers. We need to have that matched up with these units. And it's AHS with support services. That's the high level. The next level is all our partners that build housing, all of the local land trusts and nonprofit developers that have been, working with us, have been gearing up for more federal resources and looking at opportunities. They've already had things in the pipeline, frankly, for years that they don't even bring to us until they know that there's more resources available. And it's a whole host of new sort of private partners and developers that have been able to stand up housing and help us, that haven't been able to be at the table as often because the housing resources have been so scarce And so, often we're looking for the deepest affordability to serve the lowest income. And we work a lot with our trusted nonprofit housing partners to deliver that model. With some of this money, we could do a little bit more mixed income and middle income units and work with some other players and expand our capacity. So I don't know if that fully answers your question, but even in my neck of the woods in Randolph, there's been a project for a mixed income home ownership and rental for years that's been talked about, 5 years, but they just can't get in line and compete with the scarce resources. With funding like this, they're in line now. If this comes to pass, and they can get cracking. So I don't know if that answered your very enough detail that you were looking for.
Well, it's helpful to know when you're talking about a network or whatever. So the plan, we do appropriate money to VHCB. The mechanics of this in terms of the appropriation and for what? Is there more specificity than what we got in the announcement?
There's sort of a year one appropriation. I don't know when it's being delivered or where it's going, but I know the general gist of how it's laid out for the housing section anyways. And it has two organizations being appropriated the funds, VHCB for a large share of the first year's allocation, which was $129 million, and then a smaller allocation to DHCD because it includes some of the VHIP units that we've already been doing, and it includes a small allocation to develop this new home builder program, which is new. It's a new concept, and so a very small allocation, $2 million in the first year towards that, and then has a larger around $20 million allocation that we would look to also partner with someone to deliver that through their funding, another funding agency besides us. So if I was to give you the numbers as I think it breaks down, it's $102 million that would be directly appropriated to VHCB and $29 million to DHCD in year, $27 million to DHCD in year one.
Okay. I guess Gus has got his hands full and his pants to hold up to get rid of $129 million.
We do have our hands full. I called somebody the other day about their pipeline, and he laughed and said, "We need to build a much bigger boat." And I think that we're going to have to approach this from a systems perspective of we're moving out of the age of scarcity for housing, where every dollar was super competitive, and we're actually going to go after trying to meet the need. And I will just add 1 point or 2 points to Josh's sense of need. Some of you might have seen a story that was in the New Yorker magazine a few weeks ago, and it was about big money interests out of state all over the country going in and buying mobile home
homes
parks and raising the rents dramatically. And there's also that appetite for larger multifamily properties where out-of-state investors want to come in. So not only are people moving here with a lot of money, but investors are looking to place money in real estate that is adding pressure to the real estate market and adding upward pressure. What I want to reemphasize, first, I just want to say thanks to Josh for his leadership and appreciate the confidence this committee has shown in us, the legislature and the governor with a housing revenue bond and last year's CRF program. When you passed 315, before you did, we asked for letters of interest with 2 weeks notice to apply for that $10 million to do fast track housing. And we got $27.5 million of requests in no time flat. And so we think that number is likely to double. I know there's one project from Brattleboro that decided not to even bother to apply and they should definitely come in and seek our funding. Um, so at that level, there is a huge need. And just to expand on what Josh was saying about the pipeline and the potential opportunities, if I was thinking about Brattleboro, next year they would apply for a project or plan to apply for the Wyndham Windsor Housing Trust, a project in Putney. But they've also been in discussions about a new municipal building with housing in it with the town of Brattleboro. And they also have been talking about a site in Guilford. So they might accelerate that with enough help to all happen over the next 18 months. There's a site that's been discussed for many years in Windsor on Jarvis Street, and another site for for rental housing. There's a site in Heartland that's being discussed for housing today, a site in Norwich, and I've heard recently from Senator Dunn about doing some residential in the old school that he's been working on for other opportunities. If I were thinking about St. Johnsbury, we're doing great work in downtown, but Senator, we talked about the Republican block a few years ago, which still needs help, and they're around the corner. There's that fire site. We know downtown Newport.
Yeah, there's no shortage.
So lots of opportunity all over the state.
What I'm trying to figure out, Gus, is we did the 10 million and 315, and because we wanted to do the dollar for dollar, we knew it was a dollar for dollar. You're not leveraging a lot, and reserving for the House and the governor budget. And the House, the governor had originally talked about 20 million, and then that got changed. That's general fund. On the other hand, we've got at this point a proposal to use in the same year 129 million of ARPA. Are there is that the right mix? That's why I'm saying, is everything additive? So you want the 50 million plus the 102 plus whatever. So that's and part of it is we're just trying to figure out all the different funding. And for people who are listening, it's incredibly difficult for the committee because we've just had it's unleashed. Everybody's got a project, or everybody's got something that they want to have funded, or don't forget about us. And so part of what we're trying to do is take the different pieces of money and look at how we align them. I'm sure it's nice to say, well, let's just everything. We just keep adding and stacking on the next piece of legislation. But for us, we're trying to figure out the kind of the interrelationship between the money that's been advanced in different bills and what is the funding source, and what ultimately, is it how do we measure the outcome from it? So my question to you is that the House, when it passed its budget, it put in general fund. I'm sure you like general fund. Can you explain why you should have the 102 plus the 50 million general fund?
That's a damn good question. And if I were in your shoes, I'd absolutely ask that. And I am not going to try to tell you that we can get 102 million in addition to the 40 million out all in 1 year. I think the case I would make for it is that you did this last year with your fast track bill. And as soon as you signaled money was going to go out, people started to think differently. There's an expression, things are impossible until they're not. And when you make it not impossible for people to imagine a much bigger pipeline, projects are going to begin to come at us at a different rate and speed. As I said, we got to build a bigger boat. We have to re-engineer how we do business. I'm confident that there's going to be a lot of demand. I can't tell you today exactly how large that's going to be. There are some other needs that perhaps ARPA will not be a good fit for. We've talked to members of the committee before about the mobile home park needs across the state. We know there's going to be a huge ask from one park in Brattleboro, but we have an emergency request for that park that you all see when you drive by in St. George with over 100 residents. They co-opted a few years ago, and they have a significant septic issue. There are 2 other mobile home parks that are under notice for sale right now.
And those would not be ARPA eligible, you don't believe?
I am not sure that they will be. So there is going to be lots of demand. If you tell me that we should spend federal dollars ahead of state dollars, we will absolutely do that. I think one of the first things I need to do with at least a small portion of the state funds is add capacity at our community partners. That may not be something that would be ARPA eligible. I was talking with the chair of your Economic Development Committee the other day. He said, what can we do that's innovative? And one of his thoughts was accessory dwelling units. I'm not sure creating a program to encourage homeowners to build accessory apartments is going to be ARPA eligible. So there are other things that we can do. The other thing about state funding is, as you all know, federal funds always come with some level of restriction. So the state funding ends up being the grease that
I know. And
makes the machine
that's,
work.
and in fact, Gus, that's the very heart of our concern, is that our most flexible money is our general fund. And so what we've tended to do is use our federal funds, and then it gives us the greatest capacity. And one of the things that I'm going to hearken back to, and I think our recent experience certainly in sheltering everyone, and that was something that you requested originally, and it wasn't permissible under CRF, and that is recognizing that right now, and reference was made to AHS, but and what they can do, but their resources are limited. And that has to do with the support services and the oversight and the supervision to families, so that once they're in housing, they can keep the housing. And you wanted to capitalize, and my memory was $5 million of CRF, and it wasn't possible. So I'm just thinking about not only, it's not just putting a roof over a family's head, it's in fact making sure that that housing is preserved, and they're not just simply going to be the subject of eviction at some point in the near future. So that's why I'm asking about, and ARPA can't be used to capitalize funds. So that's why I'm just trying to think about what is general fund, what might, what else is out there that we might want to consider funding that is housing. And that gets into the supported housing, that gets into different populations that are where a landlord's going to be reluctant to take the chance unless there's some support, some guarantee behind it. And it's with that kind of thinking that I haven't got an exact counter proposal, but I'm just saying I see that as a piece that really has to be addressed as part of this very large housing initiative.
So a couple things on that, and I'll throw it over to Josh. One is that we've been talking about that in a work group that Josh and Sarah Phillips have been leading just yesterday, about how do we make sure the service dollars are there. We believe that some of the home block grant that the state is getting on a much larger basis can be used for services. It may be that some of the rental assistance money in one of the packages can also be used for services. That is a key question for any housing provider, private landlord or nonprofit, that some people are going to need the extra help. And I think as we formulate, this new structure of delivering housing, we know for a certain portion of the population, we've got to do it with a consistent level of services, with partnerships with the mental health agencies and others. And Josh might want to add to that.
Yeah, thank you, Gus. I was going to add that both that $200 million in emergency rental assistance and $152 million allows for 10% in the first package and up to 15% in the second to be used for housing support and stability services. And so, AHS has already received maybe 5 to 6 million in proposals to help provide these additional supports and services from community providers and others And the plan is to use as much of that capacity, that 10% of that first 200 million, to provide this additional support and services.
That's 10% of expenditures as opposed to the grant.
It's yes, and in the end, it would be of expenditures, but they're comfortable enough to release, 5 to 6 million in support services now. We're releasing some too, to work with landlords in particular to make sure they're accessing this rental assistance and they have some supports to ensure, they're assisted as well. And it's going to expand to 15% in the second package. So that is added, I would say, human, service related capacity from the ARPA housing formula grants that's there. The other thing I would say to the big question that you guys are struggling with, and it's easy for me to say this, but harder for you guys to wrestle with this, is, you looked at ARPA, knew it was coming, and started to put some of the money to addressing the needs you saw. And then the governor comes with this large proposal. And what, the governor is stressing with this, since it is $1 billion of investments in Vermont, that it would be very wise to have this as one big package, transparent. Everyone knows where everything went and can, work it back up to what we bought with this, what we accomplished, as opposed to having little bits of ARPA throughout every different bill and having a really hard time explaining in a cohesive way what exactly we bought with ARPA. That's one of the big things that governor's stressed in all of us, why this package is using such a large amount and is being approached this way, because this is going to be with us for 4 years and it is a massive investment in Vermont. And so keeping it as a big recovery package together is the preference.
We understand that. And obviously, we moved some of the money out in 315 in advance of this. And we're hoping that the governor will at least let that go into law, even though it did spend a rather modest amount out of $1 billion. Perhaps it's maybe it's desirable to keep it all in one piece. Our goal would be to, when we do appropriations, to make it very clear, we'll consolidate, unlike we did with CRF, maybe all the ARPA will be in one place. But the reality is there are certain things that did not get included. And I'll be perfectly honest. We're talking about investments, absolutely wonderful investments. And we're talking about we're talking about physical infrastructure and so forth. But one of the things that, this committee is also saying, we have human capital investments that need to be made, and that would be in workforce, which ties into economic development. It talks about how we get people better educated or trained. And so there are things that are important on the legislative side that get influenced by how we use the $1 billion. So there's no question that it gives us a great opportunity. I think our record is that we're not profligate in the spending, and we want to make sure that we use it. It was one of our values when we started out with the CRF money, that one of the values was that we would use it to the extent we could for long-term investments. And that's when if you remember, right out of the gate, the Senate put the 23 million in for housing in the first bill with the business grants. And to me, that's reflective of our thinking on that. So we fully appreciate the governor's thinking. And our challenge is we have a budget from the House that spends over $500,000 of ARPA. And that was done pretty much before the governor said, well, here's my proposal for $1 billion. So this committee is in a very interesting position in terms of what has already been identified by the House as important and how they would propose to spend the money, which already exceeds the amount the governor was proposing for the first year. And we also have some other areas that we identified that we think need to be accommodated, whether it's ARPA or general fund. We'll have to weigh that out, but I hope you can appreciate sort of what it means to us on Senate appropriations as we're trying to reconcile the governor's proposal, what the House is proposing for their use of funds, and ultimately what modifications we want to make. So we have about 2 weeks to figure that out, but that's why we're here. And it would be very helpful if you have got sort of a more detailed, other than just the sheet that was given out at the press conference, in terms of what you're proposing to do and what would need to be appropriated in year one.
That should be on the way. I will check right after this meeting.
Okay, Senator Westman, you've got your hand up. You have your hand up and you're muted.
I'm muted, and a message came in and I can't get to take the mute off. So I have a couple of questions. First, Josh, you just mentioned something, a little piece about utility help. When do you think that will be available? I'm hearing from my small municipal electric utilities, and they're in the little village of Johnson. They've got $80,000 worth of delinquency just in the village of Johnson, and they're so.
And let me tell you, Rich, we have been working on some of that, and with the public service department, and so it's not ready yet, but I have language, and we're talking about $15 million would be necessary to address that utility pressure that has been identified by the small utilities, whether it's Hardwick, Lindenville, you're getting it from Johnson.
I'm getting
Green
it from
Mountain Power,
Morrisville. I got
every
it from
single
Hyde Park.
one. And that's why I said, if we don't do something, but then the question becomes one of, which fund would we use? Would we do something a more immediate, and then figure out if it's if it should be a different funding source? Like was mentioned, there's more money coming in, and it could be sort of like we did with some other areas where we got the benefit started up, and then as other funds came in, we deal with it. But it's something that has been the topic of testimony in the House, and Steve Klein has been working to give us some language that we could consider.
Do we have a timetable?
Yep. So the utility assistance program with the 200 million rental assistance is opening next week. There's already 15 to 18 million set aside for that. That is just for renters,
That was also, it covered fuel as well, not just.
Absolutely. It's even trash and composting.
Okay.
It's every type of utility service
Water,
that you can think of. Absolutely. And then the mortgage assistance piece will not come until the federal government releases its rules on how to run the program, which hopefully is any time. But that will be available to any homeowners for any of their utility bills.
The immediate thing I was hearing is utilities. The second question, and it relates to the general assistance program. And what I hear from DCF is that some of what you're purchasing for to turn over into apartments is old motels, and motels that presently are being used by for homeless, and it is backing up in creating a pressure. And although DCF had a proposal that to move the general assist, what is now general assistance, do away with that and move it into OEO, a lot of the community action agencies aren't ready to do that. So my question to you is, how many rooms are we taking that we're going to have this short-term problem that in the immediate, we're kicking the homeless people out and we're rebuilding the apartment, and how much of a problem is that? Because we're going to have an in-between time where you're doing construction that they're going to be left with no place to go.
I can't answer the specific situations where that has arisen. I haven't been made aware of those. I know we converted several motels with CRF money to permanent housing, and it rehoused the same folks, but just it turned it into an apartment. There was a kitchen and it improved their living environment substantially. And we've done that in several places across the state. And there'd be some opportunities to do that with these funds. And there'd be some new motels that currently aren't housing folks that would also be in the mix. But I think what you're also hearing from me, and certainly from Gus and VHCB, is there's better models out there that we could get started and provide permanent housing in good locations with all of the things we value if we get an early okay to spend this money, and that we can transition people out of those temporary environments into these newly created units.
I understand that, but what I'm saying is, in the short term, you're going to be doing construction projects in these motels and and there's going to be this gap. So at some level, I think we have to think about what we're going to do during that gap period of time. You don't just snap your fingers and rebuild a motel into an apartment.
Well, some of the housing people are very knowledgeable about that temporary rehousing during that period of time. But Gus, and then Josh, and then Bobby Starr's got a question. So Gus.
We have interpreted our role with CRF as having to guarantee relocation assistance. And we've done that just as, there's a big project going on in St. Johnsbury, and everybody who moved out of the old building got assistance to be relocated and assistance paying for their rent until they can move back in. So that's the sort of thing that we're going to need to do, I think, with any federal funds. There's actually a federal act, the Uniform Relocation Act, that we need to follow in order to address that very legitimate concern.
I'm just raising that because a DCF has raised that with me.
Yeah.
Josh, did you have a comment? Otherwise, I'm going to go to Senator Starr. Okay, Senator Starr.
Yes, I'm wondering if you've gotten into it far enough to find that the cost of housing and the repair of housing has gone up considerable. I don't know if that's going to affect the output in the end, or how are you dealing with the cost of materials and high cost of materials?
Everybody in this room on this call needs to be prepared for sticker shock. Some of you know how expensive some of the projects we've worked on in the past have been, whether it's been the Putnam Block in Bennington or New Avenue in St. Johnsbury or new buildings in downtown St. Albans. And I'm hearing that the cost of lumber's doubled in the last year, particularly plywood, got much more expensive after the utility problems in Texas. I guess there's a lot of factories there that make it the cost of materials is very up. Our workforce to do housing construction is limited. And the other reality we're all going to be faced with is, when there's a huge amount of public money, we've got to work with willing buyers and willing sellers. And we're going to see construction costs go up and sales prices go up too. And we're going to be really challenged that way to deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just add to that it's a reality, but we can't hide from it. I mean, we can't wait 4 years for these costs to go down. I think one of the strategies is actually just the opposite. We move quick. We deploy this money, get it on the street faster than some of our surrounding states, get, companies even adding to what we have. That's going to be the way to beat this. And, the workforce challenges, tradespeople. It's out there, no doubt, but prices will go up. They'll be paying people $20 an hour as a laborer, 25 to hold sheetrock, and people are going to get good employment out of this work. It's an economic stimulus. It's just unfortunate that we can't get better prices, but I don't think we have a choice. Our best option to mitigate this is to move swiftly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
No, I agree.
yeah, we can see those economic forces. I guess we're one of the things that we will have to consider, because the ARPA money, I don't know that was the administration going to apply in May. One of the comments that you just made, Josh, is get this money out fast. We can move this money out, and anything ARPA related on our one-time list, we could make effective upon passage. But my question has to do with just the mechanics, unlike the CRF, where we got a $1.25 billion check in the mail, so to speak, or transfer of funds. This has got to be applied for. You already made reference to that, to the home, the home ownership piece that they haven't even given the application information, just you've submitted a letter of intent to apply. So do you have any sense from your contacts and discussions when you think this money would be available? If we say, look, as soon as this bill is passed and sent to the governor, you can start spending this money.
I don't have an exact answer to that. I need to look. I think some of it will be released earlier. Others will have to go back and ask for our second share, but I can find out a little bit more detail for that. Sorry.
Right. Well, if in fact, I don't know, let's be optimistic and we have a budget passed by May 15th. That gives you 6 weeks jump on before July 1st. Right. And it's a lot, when you look at our construction season. So that's why I'm asking. The date
I've heard is mid-May, is where a lot of these funds are supposed to be available. Rules are all supposed to be in place. That's a lot of what I'm hearing from the different federal, reports of different association groups. But I can get a little bit better answer for you.
All right. Well, at this point, we're not holding anything up. Is there anything that is in the housing related list that has been identified as somewhat tenuous in terms of ARPA eligibility?
Again, just going back to the question of what would we do with state funds, we were in Senator Starr's committee a few weeks ago. We've just commissioned and gotten a report on the farm labor housing problems that the state has. And I'm not sure that repairing and replacing that housing will be ARPA eligible, but it's an issue that's of longstanding, clearly affects communities of color that we would like to be able to address. Getting back to one other question that you asked earlier about other parts of the overall package, and we should be prepared also that if the president succeeds in passing the infrastructure bill, there will be yet more opportunity, which is why I'm saying we need to re-engineer our systems and our approach, because this may not be the end of housing investment by any stretch. But there is monies going to A&R for infrastructure that maybe can be useful to our mobile home park communities. You've been, I'm sure, talking about broadband. We have a proposal from one of our developers to make free Wi-Fi available in multifamily housing. And then there's going to be money for climate. And often when we are doing projects for budgetary reasons, we get to the end and there's things like solar panels that just have to be dropped from the project. So you're right. We need to get our hands around all of the available resources and figure out how best to braid them all together, including, as you had previously mentioned, the service issues as well, for the human service issues.
Okay. Well, it sounds like when we leave town, you've still got a lot of work to do.
Darby Bradley sent me a note saying, looks like you're not getting the summer off.
When have you ever?
Okay. So we're obviously going to be putting together the list of what gets appropriated in fiscal year 22 using this funding. That's why we wanted to have this discussion. I will, on the utilities, I guess we're going to have to really look at that in terms of additional money coming down. And it's really hard to evaluate since the renter assistance piece only just got stood up. How much of that is going to be dealt with that way, and how much is homeowner related, and then I would assume some is business related. Not assume, I know it is.
Yeah.
So if the big question is, will we know those under other funding streams and just appropriate and authorize something fast? Do we, this is what we're working on, or do we do something interim until the additional money is known and the mechanics and the requirements are also better known? So that's our dilemma, is pressure from the utilities because they're carrying a lot of arrearage right now. The one thing that is better or easier is the CRF money. We could not make the payments directly to the utilities. It had to go through the, through the account holder. And so I guess the ARPA money doesn't have that same kind of, additional steps, so to speak. So that's, but it is something that on our list and we're working on it. And then we do have joint fiscal tomorrow, so we're moving some money as well there. Okay, other questions that we should ask you that we've failed to?
Come on now, fast
A
up.
million of them, Senator. We really just need to be figuring this out, and we also need you to be poking at us and asking us the hard questions, because it'll help us do a better job. And I know we're going to be in close touch as programs roll out, because there'll be questions that we haven't anticipated today that we're going to be in discussion with you about.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
the last thing, thinking about whatever this looks like, whatever the appropriation, building in ways to adjust if things need to change, as you've done in the past through joint fiscal or other places with, operating on such short deadlines and so much money. We always need to be able to come and do the right thing, that we didn't have the right answer when we talked to you.
Yeah, I think the one advantage here is the CRF money had just such an unrealistic deadline that it just had to be dumped so quickly that it, and the constraints. I think we did a pretty decent job with it, but at least this money allows for a more thoughtful approach. It's just how we take it and look at it in total, and understand the kind of the interrelationships between the different benefits or needs. And because it can quickly become, let me tell you, an ad hoc list of everybody's wish. And that's our challenge here, is to make sure that that it is as synchronized or as cogent as it can possibly be. Senator Starr.
Yeah, I was going to ask Josh, we talked the last time when you were at the committee hearing about apartments, and people could rehab them and you folks would apply and work with them at $30,000.
Yeah, it's VHIP.
Pardon?
It's VHIP, and there was a bill that we passed and we stripped the funding out. It came from Senate Economic Development. The governor's proposal is $5 million for 3 years for a total of 15. And our bill that we stripped the funding out was at a $3 million level. I think that's what you're referring to, Bobby.
Yeah, well, I believe so, but we had a limit of $30,000 on an apartment. And I'm wondering, with the cost of materials, the way that has gone up, do you have any plans to raise that limit up a little higher to help offset some of those costs?
So two thoughts there, Senator Starr. one, there's a match component requirement for the landlord, so they can always contribute more. The other piece is that in the infrastructure and climate change proposal, I think when you see the actual appropriation language, there is actually money appropriated to help with VHIP, to help with deep energy efficiency, fuel switching, to go to all electric. And so they've built into some of their climate change and healthy homes initiatives money for housing, because they know that's where we get the best, bang for our buck as far as people reducing CO2 emissions. That's where people spend the most time. It is a way to accomplish both goals. So we think adding that money to the VHIP, that's part of that match that they can bring in, that we can allow to be counted as match. But it really is, once again, another federal source of funding to help the property owner bring it up to these standards. So that'll help.
Yeah.
The other thing that I just remind the committee is in the governor's proposal, and it's only a proposal at this point, is $100 million set aside or allocation to support the climate action plan, which is not coming out until December. And the two largest areas of carbon emission are transportation, which is over 40%, and then the heating, thermal related generated. And so it's hard to envision that we would have 100 million set aside for a plan that somehow doesn't connect back to either home efficiency, energy efficiency efforts, or transportation related, because they're such a big chunk.
I thought we were all supposed to get new Teslas.
Yeah, stand in line.
Yeah, for each senator, and we'll get a Chevy for each House member. That little Chevy
chicken in every pod, and a Tesla in every garage, huh? Okay. Other comments or questions? Otherwise, I'm going to, if you would provide us with that sort of more detailed as it would relate to spending, we will take a look at it. Okay,
Thank you.
Gus, you're about to, oh no, just say thank you.
Thank you very much.
Jen didn't get to say anything, but.
I'll say thank you also. Yeah, thank you for your receptivity and hard questions. I think what the House passed with the general funds would allow VHCB to go forward with the whole range of housing needs, that we know how to use it, and that what the governor has proposed is looking at the federal ARPA funds and the previous stimulus packages where he sees the gaps, and that's it. There's not very much in that for capital. There's really just 10 million in all three of those bills that was specific to capital. And we know that that's not now coming until the rules on that won't be out until this fall. So I think what the governor and Josh are proposing is to fill in that third leg of the stool that they see as the shortest right now, which is capital.
Okay, but it seems like the House filled in quite a bit with 50 million of general funds.
Yes.
You did.
The leg's getting longer.
Okay. Unless there are further questions, we'll let you go back to your business in hand. Sounds like you've got plenty to keep you busy.
Thank
We'll
you.
be busy.
So Chrissy, I'm going to have to pull up the agenda because I haven't got it committed to memory. What is the next item? Just going back to the walkthrough?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So we have Stephanie, who is obviously in her office, as we can see, who's going to start walking us, picking up where we left off.
So through last Friday, you've gone through basically the base appropriations. You didn't go through transportation or debt service.
No.
But that's, you'll do transportation, concurrent with the bill that comes out of the committee.
Yes,
And
and I'm the reporter for that section, and I'm on transportation. So I think I don't think we need to go through that. But once we accept the transportation plan, we're basically saying we would endorse the appropriation requirements to go with it.
And then debt service is pretty straightforward. It's just, there was no change in the House, and it's just tied to the schedule on the.
And we do
bond.
have to pay. Unfortunately, when we borrow, we have to pay back.
So, so what we were gonna do starting today is walk through the back of the bill, the language part
Okay.
of the bill.
All right, that would be good.
And so Chrissy sent out a PDF of the bill as passed the House. It's many pages long. But we're gonna start on page 92. And there'd be parts of this that will sort of just skip the line right over because they're one-time spending, and you'll come back and do that in sort of comprehensive chunks. But
All right, so do we have a link? Should I be looking for a link?
there was a PDF attached to the email that Chrissy sent out earlier today. Chrissy, do you know what time that one went out?
I believe it was, hang on, let me pull it right up here. It went out at 10:56 a.m.
The same time Dave Walk was saying, fund Prevent Child Abuse Vermont. Huh. Okay.
I got 10:55.
From Chrissy? There's two PDFs attached, and you want the one that says H 439 as passed the House, 4/7/2021.
Oh, I got just the whole big bill again.
Yeah,
And then you want to scroll down to page 92 of that PDF. It's
Well, that,
186.
that takes me quite a while. Is there some way to move it fast? Other than just hold the arrow down arrow?
There's a slider on the right-hand side of your PDF usually. If you're opening it in PDF as opposed to in that sort of weird Mozilla thing.
Oh, I didn't have a migraine now before. I got it now.
would you like me to share it on the screen?
Oh, wait a minute. I'm on the web report.
No, you want to be in the bill itself.
I know.
See,
I personally wouldn't mind if Chrissy shared it on the screen. I don't know if people would find that annoying.
No, that might be a better thing if we.
Okay.
What page is it?
It starts on page 92.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
so
I
that-
started looking at it because I wanted to go in and see the language on about that mental health workforce training, which apparently got tricked. But then I gave up, couldn't find it.
We will, as we march through, we'll come upon it in the 318 area.
Yeah, I figured. So that's what I'm, all right.
Yeah.
So why don't we get started here with,
So that 84 million at the top, that's the debt service number.
mhm.
And so B1100, this is where the House put together its frame around 650 million of the $1 billion ARPA pot.
What page are you on? I'm sorry again.
92 going on to 93 if you're in the actual PDF of the House passed bill.
Great, thank you. Yep.
92.
okay.
Okay. Everybody got it?
Yep.
Okay.
Vibrant local communities.
I have a question already.
Yes. Are there quotations there? I gotta check.
Well, no, I'm wondering, the first item on page 93 is 250 million for investments in the health and well-being of families and small businesses to create an equitable, resilient Vermont.
What does that mean?
That just seems so incredibly vague to me.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering what, in their discussions, and maybe Stephanie can help us, in their discussions.
I thought
Oh.
Senator Baruth, you had some reservations about even doing that, sort of
Oh, I-
pre-allocating.
I do,
Okay.
but I'm
So if we
wondering,
don't do it, then we won't
then I
have
don't
to.
have a question. Yeah,
Right.
okay.
So I think that's one of the questions that we have is whether we want to create that frame of 650 million, or whether we simply, for the purposes of this budget, appropriate the money for FY '22, or if we're doing something for 2 years, make that clear. Senator Sears, you've got your hand up.
Well, I mean, I'm just amazed that we would spend 250 million, 150 million, 100 million, 100 million, 50 million with these little bits, and we fight over $5,000. And then we spend $600 million without even a paragraph
Yeah,
as to what we're spending it on. I just can't, I mean, this is really,
I've always said we throw away millions every day and argue over the crumbs.
So I'm going to suggest this this House framework for 650. We not spend a lot of time on it, because I think our framework is probably going to be driven by, we can go back and look at what areas that we want to make investments, and then see what it comes up to. Otherwise, we could spend a lot of time. Is 250 the right amount, et cetera? So maybe the better thing is to go into not the framework for this 650 million, but
well, this is the governor's proposal, right?
no, this is the House.
House.
This is the House budget.
Yeah, but I
And-
thought
and
the
it-
governor wanted,
The
No.
governor put out his $1 billion framework last week,
oh, okay.
um,
Oh,
across a 3.5-year span with that level of specificity. I will say that the House did this very early, in early days of ARPA, and, and concurrent with, their decisions around the budget, as a way to sort of say, these are the areas that we want to invest in. So this section doesn't actually appropriate any money. It simply lays out, this
The
is where we think,
framework.
yeah.
That's why I'm saying we should just not spend a lot of time on what the House created as their framework at this point, because by the time we get done with what the governor has asked us to consider as his proposal, plus what the House has passed, we're above probably 650 million right now.
Oh, yeah.
Chrissy has something.
Do you need to go back to sharing on the screen, or are you guys all now individually pulling up on your own devices? I just don't want to overstep.
I don't know. Does everybody have it on their device?
I have it
on
on mine.
my device.
Are we looking at that bill as passed the House?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we're
I
on
got
page
it.
93, where we're getting into the appropriations.
Yep, I'm there.
I have it on my phone.
Okay. Oh my God. I'd hate to look at it that way. Everybody
How
got
can
it
you
then?
do that?
All right. So as long as everybody has got it on another device, the first item is technology.
Yeah, so this is a section that does appropriate almost $62 million of ARPA money to state technology projects. So it's a subset of that $100 million of state technology that they put in their framework. We did get expressed in the letter from the administration that 2 of the projects probably can't use ARPA because the projects themselves draw federal matching dollars as well. And we can't use the ARPA dollars to match other federal dollars. So there are 2 projects, the Building Bright Futures $4.5 million project and the $9.5 million project for integrated eligibility that probably can't be funded from the ARPA pot. So that's $14 million less than what would be. And then you as a committee, when you heard from the Agency of Education, they had 3 relatively small IT projects that total just over $4 million that you had asked to be reminded to include, which are the largest one I think is a $2.8 million project on teacher licensing, and then there's on adult ed and dual enrollment where the other project.
So we'll pull out 2, but why don't we go through and just tentatively say, yes, these seem to make good investment, sense for investment. I think we're not looking at it as 61 out of 100 because we're not going back to that original
Yeah.
necessarily framework. The governor originally proposed funding technology with about 51 million of the one-time general fund. So this is moving some of the IT related into the federal bucket. Just to remind people that we're using ARPA for IT. That's not part of the governor's billion. And obviously their preference was that it should be general fund. We can get into a debate around funding, but at least if we could get some agreement that these are projects that we think really need to move forward. There's no question, we made a commitment for the Building Bright Futures. We did the first installment, and that is to, and I know, Rich, you're very familiar with that, the need to get that system completed. And I think it even ties into some maybe potential federal disallowance.
Yep.
And integrated eligibility has been funded out of the capital bill. So those are both two that are in progress. We've done some deliverables, and at this, I don't know, the 9.5. I don't think that will finish up integrated eligibility, which I think is a misnomer. Right now, it's Medicaid eligibility, and what they're building is a replacement of the exchange, which has been such a debacle. Integrated eligibility is really where all the benefit programs are brought together, including like food stamps and TANF and fuel assistance, and frankly, probably childcare should be on there as it relates to the financial eligibility. But right now it's just Medicaid, and it's the replacement of the Medicaid eligibility module that got folded into the exchange. So that's just a little background. Tentatively, we want to say we'll want to continue the funding of these two projects. I guess I think we'll, in the absence of anybody saying we don't want to keep making progress to get them we'll then we'll figure we'll have to move them off the ARPA list.
Yep.
And did you want to walk through any of the other remaining ARPA ones here?
Yes, I do. I want to keep going through them.
Okay. So the first one and the largest one is the DMV system replacement at $24.5 million.
Mm-hmm.
There's just under $1.1 million for the second phase of the Permit Navigator in DEC project. Number 3 at the top of page, well, it's not, I'm looking at a printed out version, so it's a little different.
Natural Resources Board.
Yeah.
What page? What page is it on either?
94.
94,
Okay, thanks.
midway down. And that's a $500,000 project. It's a database project for going online with the application. The next largest project is this 12.75 million HR management, and that's a module that's part of the total system, the financial systems of the state, and it will tie into the budget system in a more comprehensive way from the HR system.
Stephanie, the administration submitted a list of the projects that they wanted funded out of the 51.
Yeah.
And are these
are
pretty much?
These are all of them except that the House added the last two, which are the Department of Labor ones.
Okay.
And I think the last three, the Secretary of, so 3.5, 4.5.
We know that for completion of the business portal, that's something that we started last year, was a big priority.
Yeah,
Number 12, 3.5 for phase 1 of UI modernization.
yep. That what they'd asked for last year. We did when you did not, they'd asked for it out of CRF.
Yeah. Oh, well, we know that's, who's going to say we're happy with that? I mean, this is where we're differing from the administration, but these systems are fairly long-term. They're old systems, and it seems like they are just, we're making investments for the future. It allows an opportunity to deal with our IT infrastructure that has probably been postponed longer than it should have been. Okay, and the other is the job link.
Yeah.
That was
Actually, I think
added by,
9 and 10 also might have been added by the House. I'll double check, but there's money for the state's attorney and sheriff's case management system.
okay.
And a
I'll
small,
check,
very
but
small amount of money.
I thought the Defender General said that had changed.
This is state's attorney.
I know that. Talking
Yeah,
about
I
the
think
one
he
that-
did say his changed. And I think he had worked out something else with a different, I can't remember the testimony, but yes. So there's nothing for the Defender General because I think he worked out an alternative
Yeah. I mean,
plan.
they are
There's
still having problems with. the
There's a
Odyssey
tiny amount of
system.
money for the Defender General's finalizing his case management
Yeah,
system.
I'll check on that. Judiciary is hearing from him tomorrow, along with the judiciary and the state's attorneys and the attorney general, and we'll check on those two.
All right, so we've got two different things. We've got the startup of the court judicial system again, and what the court has put in on their wish list. Then you're trying to get what the other other players need.
What they need in order to start up
But this is-
and to clear the backlog.
These
Yeah,
are
right.
the two
These
case
are-
management
No, I
systems.
understand that, but I want to make sure I understand that we understand what it is that they still need. in the
Stephanie
Defender
was
General's
saying
office.
that there's more money for the Defender General somewhere else.
They added, not one-time money, but they added the base money to Defender General. But number 10 on the list is 138 to the Defender General to complete their case management.
Yep. Well, we're
It's in
just
this-
going to check.
It's number 10 in this list.
I understand.
So, but they were taking a different approach. So you can confirm these amounts tomorrow, Dick.
Yeah.
And to see if they still are sound.
You have that written down, Alice, so we,
Take a picture of it.
okay.
Okay, that would work. And
That's
then
the
just
best
confirm.
idea yet, Alice. I'll
Yeah.
just take a picture.
Oh. Okay, technology at work here.
Of course, nobody.
And then job link, is that something that, Becca, maybe we should ask economic development to take a look at those, let me see.
Those are only released after the Joint Information Technology Oversight Committee agrees on them.
That's 12 and 13.
Oh, I thought you were on Job Link.
Well, it seems like,
13 is job link.
but did we have any others that related to them as well up above? That's what I was thinking. Maybe not, maybe not. Well, I would think the whole UI modernization would be something that they'd want to know that's in there.
I believe the subsection B is because the JITOC has, I think, seen everything else on the list as a proposal.
Oh, I'm a member of JITOC and I don't remember it.
Okay, I'll double check that. But that was because these two at the end were.
I mean, maybe they were
Outdated.
sent out, but I don't
Yeah.
remember we had a meeting. We haven't met in a long time. Well, if we could, I'll see if I can, I'll ask Michael Sorokin to just make sure so that they know what's included as a courtesy, because certainly the business portal was one of their priorities last year, and now finishing it up is on here, as well as some of the UI stuff, which I think is pretty important. So just as a courtesy, the IT pieces. Okay. And Dick, you'll take care of just confirming on with the Senate Finance on the case management pieces.
Yes.
Okay. You and Alice and Phil, you got three memories
Yeah.
at work.
Yeah,
Okay.
hopefully one of us, I've already taken a picture.
Yeah, so have I, plus I wrote some notes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank
You
you.
don't need to take a picture, Phil.
Okay.
You take a picture of this screen.
I took a picture of my phone. Of course, no one will be able.
Okay, so now here are the other ones that are related. Now, none of these, I have to say, are on the governor's list. If you work in politics, you need to understand how philanthropy works. Well, how about that pop up? So that's a total of 5 million. We did 3 million, and we carved out $500,000 for the slaughterhouses. And so the House has put in additional money for a total of 5 for working lands. It would be 4.5 because 5 million we had carved out.
Well,
Never-
you've done 3 in the H315.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I'm
then
saying out
depends-
of the 3, we carved out $500,000 for slaughter.
Yeah.
And now they want 2 million more to go for a total of 5, but would be
Yeah.
4.5 for working lands, 500,000
For the slaughter.
the allocation for slaughter. Do you have an opinion on that, Senator Starr?
Yeah, the extra money that they put into some extra money in working lands, they also are gonna move some of that towards slaughter, but they were going to do it through the application process right in working lands.
Yeah,
But
okay.
that's why the ask is there.
Okay. All right, but the balance, they compete with everybody else for the funds.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So let's move on.
Unless you wanna think we ought to earmark some for that. They thought it would be more efficient doing it right through the working lands process.
Okay. Well, we'll let them. They told us that last year, and then remember, they changed their mind in December?
Mhm.
Yeah, they couldn't handle it.
Yeah. So, all right,
They're
Well,
just
close-
too busy.
we'll close that one out. Working land seems to have a great deal of support.
So,
Vermont Symphony to offset revenues.
They're a good crew. That's fine.
I think, are you on that board, Senator Westman? Is that why that's on there?
What's that?
Vermont
Yeah.
Symphony?
I'm not on their board anymore. I was on their board. But basically Vermont Symphony had no concerts last year. So, they still have expenses, but there were no concerts in Shelburne, no concerts in Stowe. And so there was no ticket sales.
Okay, so you would support this?
Yeah, I don't know where they got the 25 from as a number. I would be happy to look at that to see what realistic, but if I ask the question, it will be more than 25.
Okay. The Council on the Arts for assistance for cultural and arts organizations to enhance digital presence. Is there some description of what that is? How did that end up on the list? Do you know, Stephanie? Is there? Did somebody have a proposal?
I believe there was a proposal, and I think we also got a correspondence from the council on this piece. We can dig it up and send it out again.
Okay.
But that's, I mean, it's meant to it's meant to be focused on the technology piece of allowing these organizations to sell tickets better online, to actually have digital presence. This is not to not to be analogous to the shuttered venue grants that might
No.
come through the federal
No,
government.
I can see that. I just was
Yeah.
wondering what constituted a digital presence.
Well,
Um,
I'm wondering if it doesn't have something to do with delivery over.
Look, who has Vermont, who has the arts?
I think
don't.
I do. Do you want me to look into that, Jane?
No, Becca has Vermont Arts Callan. Yes, but considering she's got her hands full, if you would, why don't, Stephanie, if we've got a paper, I don't want to agree to
I
something
know,
we don't fully
I saw
understand.
an email come through in the past 2-3 weeks.
Does anybody remember it?
I have a note, but it doesn't really give you any information.
Okay, then, why don't we hold that one and we'll come back? All right.
We got it on the 8th, I think. So I'm going to forward this to Chrissy. Okay. All right, Chrissy, you actually have it on the 8th from Karen Middleman. It's like,
We have somebody on, it was not muted and somebody's got a voice in the background.
that's
Is that
Steve.
you? Oh, is that you? Oh, okay, Stephanie.
I'll get it for a moment.
Chrissy, do you,
I'm forwarding you all right this minute.
was it sent, where was it directed, Chrissy?
To you, it was sent to you and Senator Nika.
Really? When was it sent?
It looks like it was April 8th at 11:02.
April 8th.
It's coming to life.
My screen that I have looking at this, the big bill on.
I could look it up, but I have a feeling it ended up in my junk file.
Oh, okay. I certainly didn't read it. Hate to say it.
Okay.
Okay, it should be in your inbox any second, everybody.
Yeah, well, I don't want to read it because I've got to go out of my document and stuff,
Right.
so I don't know how to.
Get another device. Wait a minute.
Oh. I'm going to set it aside. Let's keep going and we can come
Okay.
back. I'm hearing from the RPCs, they know that the House is proposing 75,000. More
Each.
each.
So then they're up to more, so they're up to 9.25.
Well, we gave them money to work with the towns on the money that they were getting directly.
Yeah.
That was 300,000. And so I think,
That's correct.
so this is on top of the 300,000 is the
This
850.
is just, it's 75 to each one of them. And it's on top of the 300, which, this is just my understanding is just a recognition that there's more demand on them. There has been over the past year from towns for support. And that's the reason that the House put this money in.
Okay. Well,
So
I'm
this is
sure
going
there's
You
been
do have a-
Yeah. It's going to municipalities?
No to RPCs.
no,
RPCs are using it, you said, to support
It's to support the RPC organizations themselves.
themselves. Okay.
Yeah.
I understand what you're
The
saying.
300 that you put into H315 was to allow them to provide technical assistance to the municipalities.
To the towns. Yep. Okay.
Yeah. And then, separate from this is in the governor's ARPA framework is a component within his economic development piece that is RPC, RDC pieces of it.
So I have a question about that. If they're going to charge within all the money that's going to the towns, if they're also going to charge them, what are they getting?
oh, that was only if they did certain projects that they were proposing. Is that what you're talking about? Where
Well, yes. So the governor has some, we have this, we have how many places are they getting money?
Well, you have given the RPC network the 300 to give capacity for them to give technical assistance to the towns. That's in H315.
Yeah, I got
And
that.
then there's this piece at 75 each for each RPC.
Okay.
And I just wanted to mention that a part of the governor's economic development ARPA framework would also, if you passed that, if you included that, would include some money flowing through the RPCs.
Well, I
Yep.
think that's what we need to look at. It seems like this anticipated that work. And so the governor's done it separately.
I think he would have significant grant funding flow through the RPCs though, as part of his proposal.
Okay, all right. So it's not duplicating, sort of one getting ahead of the other.
Yeah.
This
My understanding was the House recognizing that there had been significant demands on the RPCs over the past year as a result of the pandemic for assistance to towns. And that demand they view as continuing.
So the 300 is really backfilling what they've already done.
No, the 300 was to recognize that with 176 million flowing to the towns, they needed some technical assistance to make sure that they had the necessary financial reporting, that they were using it for permissible purposes. That's why we put it in 315.
Well,
this is on top of it for other activities that are related to COVID, but not necessarily the money that they got through ARPA for 176.
Okay,
But
so they're really just, there's 4 different, if we approved the governor's ARPA allocation, there's 4 different ways that they will be getting funding streams.
Alice, would you just take over for a minute? I've got to.
Sure, so certainly. Go ahead. So go ahead, Rich. Or
No,
Steph.
I'm just trying to figure out what the funding streams are. So there's 300 and 315. They got the money that's here. If we approve the governor's ARPA money, and how much was that in total?
I don't have the detail on that. It's just my understanding that the way that and probably Economic Development Committee should be understanding that in detail, but the component pieces of the governor's economic development proposal, my understanding is a chunk of it, a significant chunk of the grant money there would flow through the RDC RPCs.
Okay. And then
I just don't know how I don't know beyond that.
And then they will be able to charge for the work they're doing to the towns.
If there are projects that the towns are doing that they need help from the RPCs with on a project by project basis, that's a possibility. Yes.
Yep. Okay.
And that was in their earlier proposal that we got as part of 315. Okay, I'm back.
Okay.
Well, you
Thank
weren't
you.
gone long.
Well,
Take
Gil, the carpenters are coming to do some work on our porch, and he was getting kind of nervous about what was happening and why there are ladders. So, so I just want, that's where I had to go and find out what was happening to my front porch. I have one column that Nathaniel leaned against it and it literally moved. So you can see probably we need to have some work done. All right. So yes, Senator Westman, you all set. So obviously a lot of and I would think some of the housing work that might tie into some of the planning that they're doing, et cetera. So seems like they've been fairly busy. And I'm sure we've heard from every RPC. I've heard from 2. So have you heard from yours?
Yes.
Yeah, I heard from Dave.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually I have.
Yeah. Okay.
Authorization.
I know that some areas, they're different. We got back, I mean, some towns have different relationships with their RPCs than others. We're fortunate in the Northeast Kingdom that we have a combined RPC, RDC that is heavily utilized and is viewed as a helpful resource by towns, but maybe this will help them be more helpful to all the towns.
Yeah, it works very good.
All right, so.
I'm good with it.
Yes, Dick, I'm sorry.
No, I'm fine.
Okay. All right, so we'll close out number 4. 5 is aid households.
So this is 20, subsection 5 is $20 million. This is the weatherization related pieces. And it's broken into 4 pieces. 4 million to the regular OEO weatherization program, 9 million to the VHFA, Vermont Warms program, 5 million to Efficiency Vermont for weatherization, and then 2 million for workforce development.
Okay, so this is, I think, the area, our Natural Resources Committee that we've got the intersection with is 309.
Yeah.
And how we want to.
So these are appropriations of ARPA dollars for these purposes. And then there are 2 other weatherization pieces, but there is transfers, not as appropriations. You see one mentioned in the lead-in in 5. There's a $10 million amount for that, standing up a revolving loan fund for the municipal projects through the state energy management program in BGS. And that is a higher amount than either the governor or I think the Senate Natural Resources Committee is considering.
5 million.
The governor had 5 million. I think the Senate Natural Resources is at 4 or 5 million in their most recent deliberation or conversation.
The Natural Resources Committee was reviewing this list again today. And I think they should have something tomorrow for you.
And just to be clear, the municipal piece that's mentioned here, and we'll get to it later on, is not in ARPA funds. And then there's also the clean energy development piece or the local solar piece, however you want to view that.
My God.
When we get to that
keep
piece.
track of all these different,
So
Can we get a side by side with all the monies being appropriated to all these same groups?
And
I'm totally confused,
On
to
the-
tell you the truth.
If you're looking at your one-time list, you can kind of coordinate it with that.
Yes, you can. It's
You have
this sheet right here. It puts it into all one list.
But I mean, I've only got 3 devices going right now, so I don't know where I get the 4th to get
Well,
the next list. This would
That's
be on
why
my,
I had to print mine off.
Oh,
but it
I
does,
see.
Yeah,
um,
if you print your one-time list, then it's easier.
so
print my what list?
One-time list.
it's the one-time list that the House provided with their bill. We can send it to you again.
I think you
Would you
better send
please?
it out again, because it really takes all this stuff and just puts it in
Has it
by
on a-
section B1102,
Yeah.
where the one-time appropriations were.
Okay,
And by their funding source. And then the next wrinkle is lining those up with what the governor put on the table.
okay.
right.
I'm going to take any of those that really tie into the natural resources proposal that we got. We held that bill pending how we wanted to construct the funds here. It gets a little confusing because we've got,
I think
in addition
when
to the
you
10 million general fund appropriated, we've got ARPA, we've got general fund here.
Yes. So I think maybe what you want to do is do them in categories and keep them together, whether they're an appropriation or a transfer. So that you have everything that's in the same broad category, section by section. I think that might be easier for people to follow when you're done with the bill, as opposed to this just long laundry list, which is
Right, because this, on top of this, the governor has recommended another 21 in weatherization, which Stephanie was going through.
Oh.
he has an additional
Yeah,
3-year
his list
proposal.
says 21.
Stephanie,
Although,
just before we leave this, on line 4 of 5, after revolving fund, there's a semicolon. Should that be a full colon?
So probably it's a really clunky way to write the appropriation. It's the 20 million that's actually being is the active appropriation.
Understood, but if you have a
Yeah.
semicolon there, then it doesn't relate to the previous clause.
Yeah. So that probably should be a colon. Thank you. I actually just circled the 20 million and overwrote the semicolon.
Okay.
Although we haven't made any decisions on, well, in other words, this is using ARPA funding, and the
This
governor's
20 million
proposal.
it's ARPA funding. And then the transfer to the Clean Energy Development Fund is ARPA funding, but the 10 million mentioned here is
I
general
know.
fund. And so I think we want to construct them all together regardless of their funding source. I think we want like a climate or weatherization section. We want a housing section. We want.
That's true, but part of what, we're going to have to do for each of these is sort of crosswalk the extent to which they're additive or embedded in the
Exactly,
governor's
yeah.
recommendation. It's all I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Because this is ARPA one way, he's got ARPA a different way, and we've got to come up to some agreement of what we want to have here.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's all additive, and I think we need to be careful about, or make it very clear that that's what we want, or we would say, well, that's what they proposed. The governor said this, and this is what we'll come down with for the ARPA funding.
And in the end, you will get there. Either way, how you structure it, but what you appropriate will be the amount, unless you're allowing other bills to add on to it.
I
So
know. Well,
what
we're
you-
not allowing any other bills, Stephanie,
Okay.
because we can't handle it.
Well, I was gonna say, to aid households, small business and nonprofits negatively impacted by COVID-19. Who the heck wasn't impacted? But it's not really true, because it won't aid households, small businesses.
What number is that one?
Bunch of.
It's
You're
the
talking
first
about
phase
Five.
of 5.
You think the language is it really necessary?
I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's real, because you're
I
not
think
gonna
it was,
be aiding all households. You're not, everybody was impacted by COVID.
This isn't the death money, is it?
No.
this was, I think the reason that phrase is there is because the way the ARPA state fiscal recovery fund is drafted in the ARPA bill, in the federal bill, you can use these monies for aid to households and small businesses. So it
Good,
was
I
just
was
tying
negatively,
the use of the dollars here to the language in the federal bill.
but if I'm reading this and I'm reading it right now. I believe I have been adversely affected by COVID-19 pandemic.
Well, maybe, but you may not
my
fall
aid
into one
here?
of the categories.
Well, that's the problem with the way this is written.
Well, my question is, do we even need the language as long
I
as
don't
what we're
think so.
spending on is permissible?
I don't
Right.
think so.
And we
It's
did
just that,
we did it for CRF, but do we need to do it for
it's just so
ARPA?
they can put out a
I
little
think-
blurb and say, hey, we did this for everybody. But
Yeah.
everybody isn't gonna get benefit.
Especially if you sort of pull this whole section apart into its component pieces when you do your distribution of ARPA and general fund. I think you probably do want to rewrite, and we want to do, I think another piece that we're going to want to write in is how, if we do get an infrastructure bill in the fall, how we, don't spend this and put the infrastructure money first to the extent that it's allowable. All the dollars in ARPA we want to go out, consistent with federal law, federal guidance, et cetera. And so I think that might be a better way. This was just an initial, the House was doing the ARPA money very, very new to the bill. And so I think there was a concern initially that we try and tie these appropriations tightly to the federal bill to the extent at one point.
But we're going to rewrite it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
So we don't have a visceral
Glad I'm
response.
not being just a grumpy old man.
Well, you are, but we're going to rewrite it.
I was going to say, I don't know if we agree to that exactly.
Oh,
Oh, we're all in agreement with that.
Oh, that I'm a grumpy old man?
Yeah, you're a grumpy old man.
I agree.
And they don't even know underneath that grumpy facade what
No,
a
they
softy
don't.
you are.
They don't, but I mean,
But we know
Yeah.
the other side of Senator Sears.
yeah.
Okay. So, and we know that we also are going to have to kind of align that with what came out of natural resources
In the real world.
and the real world.
What
number
are we on?
We're
We're
on
up to number
97, and we're on number 5, and Senator Sears was commenting to aid households, et cetera, which we're going to rewrite. So why don't we go down to what
Okay.
they're proposing to do is 4 million to be used for fiscal year 22 and fiscal year, so they're appropriating 2 years of money here. And up to 150 for vermiculite remediation and home repair.
I'll tell you something, 1 year in our old house, when we were painting it and wanted to do the vermiculite in the paint on the ceiling. And we came home and the guy that was painting there, he had a spray gun. He sprayed every wall with vermiculite and all the ceilings. So there was vermiculite mixed in with the paint on absolutely everything. And if you brushed against the wall, fell against it or something, you got scraped. So I didn't realize vermiculite was that bad, but
It has asbestos in it sometimes.
yeah. So then, I mean, I still put it in plant dirt.
Well, yes, they do vermiculite. It loosens it a bit.
Yeah. So what
Lightens- yeah.
they use it for insulation, I guess.
Yes, they did.
Used for.
So this is once again natural resources that tied into this is the DCF, and this is where they wanted the money to go directly to them,
Okay.
and it does.
Yep.
And because some was the desire of natural resources was to create a special fund. And then money would be transferred out of the special fund, similar to what we do for water quality.
I see. But that's not what we're doing here.
Well, that's not what the House did, and that's what we've got to try to align with what Senate Natural Resources was proposing about what would go into a special fund and who would administer and where would the special fund be administered.
I mean, OEO's been doing a pretty good job with this, I thought.
Well, they've been doing it for years, and also there's weatherization program has about a $12 million program that's been in place for many years. So this would be on top of it. So, Rich, do you have any guidance in terms of what your committee, other committee wants to do?
They'll have language within the next day or so for you on all of this and that. And so I really don't want to speak to the committee, but as I said, on top of this money will be the proposal for the governor with his 21. So we'll have to sort that out.
We will, because this anticipated probably some of the governor's proposal. And the other, of course, is going to be that 100 million that they've set aside for the plan once that comes out in December.
That's exactly right.
Okay, so I guess we should move down to.
So in the money going to housing, is that can that be used for anything like would vermiculite be permissible there?
Perhaps in the VHIP program,
Yeah.
if you had a.
VHIP, they made reference to that, that because that was in response to Bobby's question about should we raise the cap? And they said, that they thought this would fall, there would be additional resources to the landlord from fuel switching and the healthy homes money, assuming that we agree that we want to put funding there.
I think what you're going to get is more the numbers from natural resources. I think the same principles that we've applied, that we've talked about, that we should use federal money first, the most restricted money first, and I think all of that they're going to be looking for the Appropriations Committee to sort out on that level. It's just what the numbers are.
Okay. Well, the other thing I need to have sorted out is how much of what the House put in for weatherization using ARPA is really reflective in the governor's
It was the governor's
proposed
original
use.
general fund amount. He had done different amounts, but similar things. And so they used ARPA here. This is part of how they freed up the 150 million that they reserved on the retirement side.
So the question for us is, do we want to add more ARPA based on the governor's recommend
That's correct.
on top of what the House did to free up money?
Yeah.
Okay. Pretty soon, we're gonna have that $1 billion already spent.
Oh, yeah, we're doing
What are we
good.
gonna do next year?
Well,
We
there'll
like
be
the-
some more coming.
Who's gonna be here next year?
You all.
Well,
You,
We
Bobby.
are, it's our
Oh, that's
second.
right. There's no election, is there?
there's no
I'm sorry.
election, you're gonna be here.
I got confused. I thought I was in Virginia. They're doing an election this year.
Yeah, they do it on the off year in
Yeah,
Virginia.
New Jersey and Virginia.
Yeah.
That'd be
Yeah,
a good idea, yeah.
You haven't
But-
got to beat Campion this year.
Yeah, but
Just
the
make-
Lord willing, Dick, you'll be here again one more year.
By the way, his picture was on the front page, or actually it was inside today.
No,
Campion?
inside, that must
Yeah,
have been
yeah.
depressing.
For what
was.
reason?
Oh, he's the powerful chair of Senate Education.
Powerful and energetic.
Yeah, he's looking at something. I don't know.
He's looking at,
As opposed to the former chair?
Yeah, as opposed to the former chair.
Who was powerless and lethargic.
Lethargic.
I
And
like
there's-
the lethargic part.
And and
How
a
much
new
did
addition
you
to
pay
this
Becca
committee,
to
huh?
get off that committee?
We have a powerless, lethargic new member. That's well,
Maybe Campion is in the banner because he employs the valet and the PR person
That
and he's
could be,
rebuilding the small business sector.
yeah. Well, I mean, he's a star.
okay,
Yeah.
well, it's 3:30. I'm thinking probably
Thank
we'll
God
grind
it's
through until
3:30.
4.
Oh, Lord, thank God we're gonna leave at 4.
Yeah.
I'm
Well, I-
gonna be able to make it faster. Tell ya.
Did anyone see this
Is
weekend? It
this
was
Friday yet?
Not yet,
No.
not yet, not yet. So I think this committee needs to see, there was a very honest advertisement for a Chihuahua named Prancer, which I think I'm gonna have to send around to you because the woman was so honest about what a demonic little Chihuahua it was and how nobody would ever want it. And please save me from the Chihuahua. She's been inundated with requests to adopt this thing. So I'm gonna send it to you. It goes to the lethargic former chair. What if we were all just more honest? What would happen?
Oh, well, I bet it'd be interesting, the adjectives that got thrown our way.
Well,
I'm going to suggest that we will see what we can do on the weatherization crosswalk with our other committee. This is 6 is racial equity.
In the office of racial equity, and then 7 is in the human resources department.
is that general fund or is that?
So
No,
they've
this
done this in ARPA. This is one you might want to consider. These two
Yeah,
you might
'cause-
want to consider moving over to general fund.
Yeah, are they,
This is money in addition to the positions.
Yes, the
yeah, but
positions.
the
is in
training I
base.
could see as being one time, but I'm concerned that,
What is the health equity and health disparities money going to?
Is that data
Well, that's part of
collection?
their statutory responsibility of the
Right.
office.
and I'm wondering if that's gonna be ongoing or
But I mean, I know that's their mission, but is it, you said the positions were elsewhere, Jane?
The positions are in the base.
Yeah.
They're funded in the base,
So I'm
in the
just
agency of
wondering
administration.
I
what the
think that
180 pays for.
I think probably we need to have some, do you know what the source of the request was?
I don't know. I think it was part of the health equity bill, but I also think it's like for the contract and potentially, system, it's, I don't,
I suspect that's out of the House Health Committee's equity bill.
Yeah. And you did fund the first phase of it in H315 in general fund through in the data collection piece in Green Mountain Care Board.
Well, I think we should have the benefit of, did the House actually, Health Committee ever pass their bill?
Think I will check. I think they did, but I think the money ask was here.
I understand, but that bill would provide the context for the money is all I'm saying.
I'll have Nolan send it over.
Okay, if you would do that, that could be helpful. Because the House Committee was spending quite a bit of time on that issue. And I think that the sort of the context for this money is in that other bill. I don't know whether it's passed or whether it's in our Health and Welfare Committee.
Do you know the number? Does anybody know the number?
No. No.
Okay.
We'll have Nolan see.
Yeah.
To the department this is for training of staff.
Yeah.
Well, I think probably in light of some of what we've been seeing in other states, training and racial equity is probably
That's
Maybe,
cheap at
maybe they
200,000.
did too much training.
No.
I don't know if that was part of number 7 was part of that bill or not, Stephanie. Do you know?
I don't know. I think 6 definitely was because it's the analytic work.
And let me ask, our question is really, we think that this needs to be moved to general fund.
I think these are, I want to sort of revisit the source of funds on these two.
All right.
Just
Why don't we set them
what they are.
aside? We'll
Yeah.
revisit the source of fund and we will get some descriptive information so that we know exactly what it is that's being requested here for funding. State's attorneys, that's you,
Yeah,
Dick.
we'll take it up tomorrow.
Okay.
But the numbers seem a little off, but so I'm trying to figure out which one it is, but
These are the one-time requests that
yeah,
the state's attorneys have put together. They weren't all of them. They funded a portion of them, I believe.
yeah, we'll get them all tomorrow.
So
I'm
is
sure.
this a companion to what we got from the courts, just from the state's attorneys?
Yeah, I think so. We've been talking a lot about this new Odyssey system requires an awful lot more work.
Yeah.
All right,
Joe
so we'll
Benning
set
was
that.
describing something used to take him half an hour, took him 3 hours yesterday to do
Yeah.
because of the new filing system.
Well, we'll hold that, and then you're going to have that kind of comprehensive testimony on all the
Yeah,
different pieces.
we'll bring this one up tomorrow.
All right,
too.
so Alice, why don't you photograph that one?
I already did.
Yeah,
Oh, you already did.
I did too.
Good, Alice. You're
All right, so now it's Student Assistance Corporation. And this is,
So you can see the 3 different programs, the advancement grants, the aspiration grants, and the new 802 opportunity grants that they told us about when they were in. These are funding them for 3 years. So this is a 3-year appropriation in each of those categories.
Really weird that we didn't get the this money was going for written in here, so I mean, it's pretty bad not knowing.
Well, this is Senator Baruth. He's got VSAC, and this was what they requested when they came in.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so
but
they requested
be a
1
little
year with
headline there, what they were gonna do with it, you know?
So this
Printed.
is this ARPA money, Stephanie?
this is
Yes.
ARPA money for this 3-year period.
Is the opportunity grants any overlap to what we already started in 315?
It may be a little bit.
that's what I was
but
talking to Phil about.
Well,
is
the
to-
opportunity, it may be a little bit, the opportunity grants are the ones where you would have a family with a $50,000 or less income would be able to attend CCV for free.
Right, so
Essentially,
in that respect, there would be overlap to what we.
Yeah,
we
to the
did.
extent that a recent high school grad had uptake on the
Yep,
on the program, the sort of McClure extension program that you did in H315, it would make these dollars go further,
Just a breeze.
essentially.
okay. Okay.
That's the way you would
So
kind of view that.
So these would be added
Oh, this is John Murphy.
to the McClure
Oh,
grants.
So the House views them as additive. And the question is, do you want to fund 3 years here or a different amount, 2 years to be consistent with what you did in 315? But the House does view them as additive. And so what you did with the recent high school grads, I think makes particularly the 802 opportunity grants, stretch further.
But why is
They
that
had-
allowed under ARPA?
Well, you did them in ARPA. You
We
did all
did
the
them.
higher ed in ARPA in 315.
Just like we used CRF for workforce with state colleges last spring. This is, I think we've got to, Philip,
Yes.
before we do this, I think with all this higher education, we've got to kind of understand it and separate it out.
Yeah.
Because we've got this, we've got what we did in 315, and then we've got then below, as you can see, we've got state colleges, which
UVM.
And what would be helpful to me, Jane, and I'll produce it for the committee, is a one sheet or a spreadsheet that shows the higher ed pieces, VSAC, state colleges, independent colleges, UVM, and then all of the money and what the proposed sources are.
well,
So that we can.
and
look at it.
Stephanie may have done that already to
Oh,
some
have you,
extent. But what we've got is just it's kind of everything in here from the part that's really hard to synchronize is C, 20.5 million for workforce training, critical to the post-pandemic.
That's what links to the spreadsheet that was sent out earlier today on the 20.5.
Yes, the one that I got earlier. But I'm not sure. I think we need to go through what's in that 20.5, is what I'm saying. Because it's everything from welcome home scholarships, that's 4 million, degree completion, 3 million, critical occupations, 2 million. And it was everything that, got sent over from Vermont State Colleges. And
Well, and then I
some
just
of
had
it-
Chrissy send around their additional $23 million ask, which seems to me to duplicate some of what is in this bill. And maybe they can make an argument that it doesn't, but you see they've got increased operating costs for COVID, and they've got post-pandemic system transformation, system-wide deficit caused by the pandemic. So they have COVID expenses layered in here, then you'll see Chrissy just sent you a $23 million ask for IT and other things around COVID. So I get confused not having those one-time asks also listed here.
So,
Yeah, Rich.
yeah, and the piece that I get, will the transformation where I can see the 20 million taking care of the deficit looking back will be gone. When I look at the next one in B, 20 for post-pandemic system transformation, that I think bleeds into next year. I want to know what I'm going to be asked for next year. I don't want to do all of this and just not have the money next year and fall on my face. So, you know, kind of like the grants above to VSAC where they've laid out the 3 years. What am I looking at to get out to the other side of this?
Well, I think the other thing, Philip, if you could crosswalk what's there with what came out of the select committee recommendation or the consultants, because I think what they're doing is putting a fence around the second year of those transformation costs using ARPA.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely are funding the full cost of the transformation with the ARPA money. So that one's easier to understand, I think. But you know, there's the House bill, there's
if you look at A, Philip, if you look above A, it's called 20 million to them for the statewide deficit caused by the pandemic. Now they're coming back and saying, well, we not only do we need the 20 million caused by the pandemic, but we need an additional 23.
22, 23 more.
That's what I'm saying. There seems like there's some duplication there. I would like to talk it out with them.
Okay.
Get it all on one sheet, make sure I understand what I think.
They do have a 5-year pro forma sheet that assumes this 20 and then the 20 transformation, and then what they are calculating would be the benefit to their operating position from the workforce piece as well, and then showing over time what they expect the incremental asks would be. They do have that sheet, and we could go over that with folks.
I think we have to move it out separately because this is getting so confusing for people to follow. How much of it is the COVID, how much is of transformation? Then we've got the money in the base. What does that look like in totality?
Right.
In light of, and the other part is this workforce, which is the number C, which is letter C. Was that assumed? Is this?
There is.
Is this separate and apart from that funding matrix that we got in the report?
From the select committee?
Yes. And I think it probably is because we're funding the transformation costs. We're putting 5 million into the base and we're making up the pandemic expense.
I don't, my memory is that there's no workforce money in the select committee report.
Right. So I'm thinking that this is on top of what came out of that, what is in that matrix for, over that 5-year period of time.
Although the House might be, the numbers in the select committee report were pretty high for this year and next year in terms of the combined amount was like 80 million. So I think what they're doing here is they're using these different categories with ARPA money to get up to that level. So not funding it out of general fund, but hitting the general level asked for.
I don't know.
Select committee.
We need to be clear, and the way I'm interpreting the C is something that, just like we did in 315, want to use some upskilling and workforce and using the state colleges as the mechanism to do that, and UVM. This is doing the same thing in addition to what we're doing for funding based on that 5-year stabilization funding.
Mhm.
So I think we need to have a sheet that summarizes everything. One is what is being done to comply with the recommendations of the select committee. One is the base. One is the governor proposed 20. They said we needed 40. So how much of it is there? And then is the workforce training something on top of that transformation piece? And if so, what are the programs that we think we want to fund? And also, if you're talking to them, Phil, it seems Welcome Home Scholarships, as I'm saying, they're saying the program costs 40 million. So the new revenue that they would get from it's 1.2. Well, if you're bringing kids back into schools, I guess this is all scholarships then. So what they want to do is increase enrollment by funding more scholarships, which seems like it's on top of. It's getting really confusing how much we are obligating because first of all, none of this is in the governor's recommend. So it's all something that we're proposing to use ARPA for. Yes, Rich.
Yeah, I don't want to go through all this and not know exactly what in base we're going to be expected to produce next year and what will be the one time on top of that. And if I have ARPA money now, I want to make sure that I've got it tucked away someplace ready to help with that. I'm not willing to do all of this and then fall down next year or the year after.
Yeah, I know.
You know, if
I
I've
know.
done all of this, I don't want to throw good money at this year and then end up next year and the year after coming off from this in a place.
What about the private colleges? They don't get any of this?
Well, they have an ask into us for $90 million.
90?
90 for the 12 of them.
Yeah. You see, we're entering a season of disappointment in terms of what we can fund and how much we can fund over and above what we are committed to in that stabilization plan. And so I think, Bill, we need to spend some time to sort that out. That's what I was trying to mention to you earlier.
Can I ask Stephanie? Stephanie, could you help me put something like this together?
Sure. I think we probably, want to start with their own document, which lays out the 5 years and the component pieces of this that are embedded and how they're embedded in there.
Yes.
Yep. Even if it wasn't on one spreadsheet, even if it was on, following pages, just having everything in one place, all the stuff from the House budget, all the stuff from each of the independent colleges, UVM and the state colleges, and then the 315 money, and then the one-time asks that are not represented elsewhere.
Okay. I think that's pretty straightforward to put together. Yeah.
Okay. And then if you send it to me, then maybe you and I can work on it a little and then we can send it to the commission.
Okay. And frankly, I don't know how we want to treat the independent colleges, or whether we want to do like we did with the CRF and they could apply as a business, carve something out. But right now we're dealing with the state-funded institutions.
Some of those privates are pretty well heeled, and there's some privates like Little Sterling College up in Craftsbury that hasn't got 2 pennies to rub together.
Right.
Some of them guys could buy the state of Vermont and not hurt them much.
Well, you're talking about Bennington or Middlebury or
Yeah, like
Um,
Middlebury
Or
and
UVM, comparatively speaking.
or, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I
and
see two different things here. One of which is for the state colleges system, what are we committed to stabilize them into the future? The
Yeah.
other issue is the human capital investment that we want to support using state colleges or any academic institution or training
Mhm.
program, which is a different discussion. And
Yeah.
it seems like we need to separate that out on the sheet.
Yeah, and I just wanted to point out, we have had a couple of independent colleges go down, and when they do, they leave big holes in their communities. So I wouldn't want to forget about the independent colleges, but I think, Jane, your point that we treat them like businesses is probably a better way to think about how to compare them apples to apples with other
And don't forget the
businesses.
governor's proposal wants to put 50 million more into businesses.
Right.
Yeah, I would,
Wow.
and I do agree we should treat them like businesses. I think when you look at it, Middlebury, Norwich, they're all they all have pretty hefty endowments.
Well,
Yeah,
I wish he would change the rules. If he's gonna put more money into businesses, I wish he would change the rules because I haven't been able to figure out how we qualify or can even possibly qualify.
well, you can't qualify because you haven't lost any money, Senator Starr.
Well,
For the independent
that's all
colleges,
you've
if you
got.
don't mind.
Well, could
No.
raise the salaries of everybody sky high, and then that would make the business look like it was losing money.
I understand focusing on the state colleges, and I'm willing to go along with that, but I want to see something for the independent colleges. The endowment is not necessarily the issue by which we should be judging this. Their survival depends on a lot of things. So, I mean, I'm thinking of Bennington College myself, and what would happen if Bennington were to lose Bennington College after having lost Southern Vermont College.
Well, I do know
And they have had tremendous losses
Yeah.
due to the pandemic. They have done their best to keep their students safe, to provide education. So I would hate to think that we're gonna, put all this money into the state colleges and not consider the impact on these small private colleges
yeah,
that so many Vermont towns rely on.
I don't think that I hope that's not what I'm
No, we're
projecting.
not
What I'm
gonna do
saying is, where is the right place
Okay.
if we want to do something to recognize that they're a business, and whether we say we carve out and say we do something for them separately as a business,
Mhm.
which is certainly something that the administration should be concerned about. There is just as important a business to keep viable as many others that are out there. They just don't fall into the ACCD wheelhouse, so to speak, of what they define as their business community. So I'm not. We just need to put it all in one place, and then we need to decide. And do we make it clear out of the business grants that included in the business grant should be a certain amount
Yep.
for higher, for grants to higher ed, or do we do like we did before? We actually paid the cost of the testing and some of the COVID related experiences. So that's yet to be. That's on our list because it isn't there in the House.
But you think about all the money those kids spend, and the staff at the private colleges, it adds up to a great deal of money.
Yep.
And then the parents come to visit and keep the motels busy. And I mean, it is a big business at higher ed. And
Well,
It's about like fifth or sixth in our state, right? For income produced.
Well, yeah,
Maybe fifth.
UVM's the largest employer with the medical center added on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, so we're gonna try to do something on one sheet to help us sort this all out.
Mhm.
yeah.
Okay, all right. Because it's more than we can,
Sounds
our
good.
brains can wrap around.
It's crazy the way this is laid out. Hell, I
Well-
wouldn't know if I'm spending 20 million or 200 million.
Well, it would, if you go to that summary sheet, it will show you how,
Much total.
yeah.
That sheet. I'm sorry.
number-
Every line on this rig in front of me's got ARPA money, ARPA dash state COVID fiscal recovery. Well, why put that on every line? Why not put what it's there for? You know, why do we need to read COVID fiscal recovery on every line?
I'm not sure. I do know last time we got into a debate with our ledge counsel and Jen Carby, who basically was very nervous about not making a direct connection to the expenditure. And so it might drive us a bit nuts. And what we ended up doing was actually having an accompanying memo that gave that connection.
Oh,
So some of it has to do with creating that fiscal relationship around for auditing purposes,
yeah,
whether
gotta
we
be
liked it or
something
not,
like-
because it was something that drove us crazy. And we did end up doing a different, a supplemental memo.
yeah. Yeah.
And so we got out a lot of that language out of the appropriations bill, but it still tracked. It was still there as backup.
Yeah.
So now we're down to the University of Vermont, which leveled their room and board fees. That was a request that we received from them that was COVID related, to try to offset the economic impact. I assume that's an ARPA related expenditure. I mean, it's a permissible expenditure.
We believe so. I mean, they did have, their
That's a
list of
yes.
requests higher than this, obviously, but
I know
This
there was
is-
something else they were asking for as well.
they had, they were asking, their total revenue loss, they pegged at around $20 million. That's COVID related. They were asking for some HVAC, for some research and some
30
endowment
million
money
HVAC.
as well.
I asked them for more specificity on the HVAC. So I actually have a breakdown of how they get to the 30 million, which buildings, but it seems like it might be moot if we're not going to get into that level of funding for them or the independent colleges. I'm not sure.
I think we're gonna have to put in some limits on what we're gonna be willing to carve out, because we could be spending all of it. I mean, the total request from the university was 100 million. That's 10% of the grant right there.
Yeah.
So I think we're gonna have to put some independent colleges almost in $100 million. That's almost 10% right there. We could go through this very, very quickly in that regard. So we can at least say, out of what we have here, the House had selected out the 2.2 to make up the lost revenue.
For their room.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's fungible money for them, so they can apply it.
I think now is a good time to break. It's after 4 o'clock. I had promised Ginny Lyons I would talk to her at 4. So I think we spent a lot of time on the higher ed, and I'm going to break for today, and then we'll pick it up, hopefully with that one page, and then we'll go on to the